Hey everybody, this is Craig with Out on Film, and I am very happy that you are joining us for another Out on Film Conversations. And today we are going to be talking to the people behind the whistle. And so I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Out on Film's own Belinda Hernandez, who's going to be your host for this conversation. So please enjoy, and thank you for joining us. Belinda, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Craig. Yes, this is a sweet, sweet movie, The Whistle, and I hope you all enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it yet, I know that you will. I have today with us the producer, director, StormMiguel Florez. Thank you for joining us. And then one of our participants in the movie who was interviewed, you can see her throughout, is Barbara Priscilla. So thank you both for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. The documentary, I loved it. My emotions went from laughing out loud to being so moved, and we'll get to the range of emotions that you were able to capture in this film. But for those who might not have seen it yet, StormMiguel, give us just a quick little, synopsis of what the film is and what you captured in this documentary.
Sure. So The Whistle is a documentary about lesbian youth culture in Albuquerque in the 70s and 80s. It's very specific, and it is about a community that really, kind of against a lot of odds, found each other and really was a deeply connected community. We were small in that Albuquerque is not a huge place, but we were large enough that we didn't all actually know each other. So The Whistle actually just goes back, and I interviewed folks who were out at that time and who were youth at that time. And the reason it's called The Whistle is because it kind of is loosely around this code that we had, where we had a whistle, the dyke whistle, and it was a way that we found each other. It was a way that we presented ourselves to each other, kind of called each other in public places in a safe way. And it's about some of the codes that we use, but it ends up being about a lot more than that. I think we initially thought we were going to go in and, kind of just like, what is this whistle about and where did it come from? And it ends up really being about this particular group of folks and the resilience and the connection during that time. And
Yeah. And I think what it also did so well is capture that the teenage years where people are just trying to come into their own, not just sexual identity, but their own identity. So it's a very tender time. Barbara, and you can jump in here too. I'd like to know, I was saying my range of emotions went from laughing out loud at some of the things like Wrecked, and we'll talk about that, but also to what teenagers had to endure, like clear bullying, being ostracized. Talk a little bit about that, about how you may have seen that or been, someone who was a victim to this type of behavior.
Well, at that time, we were all in the closet. So, it was all about not really being out there because we didn't want to be treated differently and we didn't want to be victims. So a lot of what we did was a lot of code and a lot of, the whistle and the 143 on notes and things like that. So we wouldn't be singled out by our fellow peers. Things we did, late at night. I know we talk about how we would go to the after hour clubs. We'd sneak, literally, I never did, but, we did sneak out of our houses. I remember I was driving at the time and I would go and I'd pick up my friends and they'd be sneaking out of their houses and, and we'd go late at night and we wouldn't tell anybody that we were doing things like that for fear of being singled out and being treated badly.
How do you remember how and when you first learned of the whistle?
I remember learning of the whistle probably at the softball field. I think I was very young. I think I was like a sophomore in high school, freshman, sophomore in high school. And I remember, being at the softball field and hearing it and asking, what is that? And then everybody would, they would just tell you what it was, or, because we were friends all, so there were some friends, within that group already. So, but I do believe I learned at the softball field.
And Storm Miguel, you do a really good job in the film to look at all the different types of urban myths and where this whistle might have come from. Where do you think it came from? How do you think it came to be known and used so perfectly in Albuquerque?
Well, we talk about it in the film, and I don't. It's not like a huge reveal. I wasn't sure if that was going to be some big reveal or if the film was going to be centered around it. But I definitely don't want to give it away too much. But I do feel like there were all these different kind of moments of where we thought it might have come from. I honestly didn't think when I started making this film that we would learn where it came from, because even then I was asking people as I was learning it, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I was asking everybody, where did this come from? Where did this start? And no one knew. No one knew. So it turns out that it did come from, we're able to find out where it came from. And it was beyond where I thought when I first started making this film. I thought it was just going to be about the 80s. And it turns out there were people that came before us in the 70s who actually brought that piece into our community. And so it was really cool to get to meet them, see who paved the way for us and who really made it a bit easier for us to be who we were at that time. And so, yeah, I don't want to get too specific about the whistle and where it came from, but we were able to find some things out.
You had some really, really good moments in there. The whole Christy McNichol part of it. You want to talk a little bit about that? I did laugh out loud at the Christy McNichol part.
Oh my gosh, there were so many fun moments making this film. Just to give it context, I made this film and I'm in the film because I was a part of that community at the time. I'm transgender, and at the time I identified as a little dyke and or as a lesbian. We used a lot of words to describe ourselves back then. And so I just want to put that into context of why I'm in the film. And there were all these beautiful surprise moments. And one of them is when Gloria is showing her scrapbooks. First of all, that she had these scrapbooks. She just saved everything. She had like bubble gum wrappers and little notes and just different things that reminded her of different people. And so she was showing us her scrapbooks, and there's like a couple pages that were just fully dedicated to Christy McNichol. And it made me so happy because Gloria is about, I want to say, a little over 10 years older than me probably. And so we realized we were loving Christy McNichol and crushing out on Christy McNichol at very different times in our lives. She was in high school and I was in elementary school. And so it was really sweet to just have that point of connection and see like where we all had kind of our points of connection, even if we didn't necessarily experience the same things at the same times in our lives.
Another moment that I liked, and Barbara, you mentioned there were some codes, but you want to reveal when it was that you first got wrecked, Barbara?
Oh God. Nobody has asked me this question and I've waited.
I just put you on the spot. I just think the whole term wrecked. First of all, for those who may, just put that in context for us. Explain, first of all, what wrecked means.
Okay, so wrecked, so again, like I said, we had codes and things like that. So we would always ask each other, who wrecked you? And for us, that meant who was your first homosexual experience? Who was the first girl you kissed or the first girl that kissed you and wrecked you, basically. And so I was wrecked when I was a junior in high school. It was after a girls' basketball game in the girls' PE locker room. And so let me take a few steps back. So I had two really good friends that I had known since kindergarten. We grew up together, and I knew that they were together. They were lesbians and they were together. And so I hung out with them a lot. And I mean, Storm knows this because, he's known me for years, but I wasn't your typical dyke. I wasn't your, I would be what they'd call a lipstick lesbian, I guess. And so I hung out with a bunch of the dyke looking girls. So I knew them. And there was this one girl who, she used to leave me notes in my locker. She found out my locker combination and would leave me sodas during class, while I was in class. I mean, we played volleyball together, and, she was very attentive to me. And after this basketball game, I can't remember why I was upset. there was something going on, and she hugged me and she was consoling me, and then she just kissed me. And I have to tell you, it was like, I remember the shock. I was like, oh my God. And then from then on, I was wrecked, and I was a part of the club.
I
But,
love it.
yeah, that was it.
I love it. It's a good story. And again, those are some lighter moments in the story. StormMiguel, I think you really captured, like I said, just the emotion from what teenagers went through. Let's talk a little bit about. I thought a powerful part of it, and I don't want to give too much away, about Miss Levitt and Tina's mom coming up to her afterwards. You want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, I just thought that was such a powerful piece of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was really wonderful to get to interview Havens Levitt and Tina, that they were both available for this. I was very close to Tina growing up, and actually I think I met you, Barbara, through Tina.
Yeah.
And Havens was a teacher at Del Norte High School where Tina and I went, and it was really great that they were both very excited to talk about their stories. And I got to learn things about their story that I didn't know. I always knew that they were close, and I always knew that Havens was really a mentor to Tina in a big way. But I didn't know this story about Tina's mom meeting Havens, and Havens being horrified to meet Tina's mom. So Havens was a teacher at the school we went to. I think I mentioned that. So yeah, this scene talks Havens telling the story about how she was horrified to meet Tina's mother because she didn't know what that meant, or if Tina's mom was going to come and like yell at her for, as she said, like leading her daughter astray or whatever. And she was a mentor, but it ended up being actually a very sweet moment that we're not quite expecting to hear about. And those things happened. It's really interesting because there was just the gamut of interactions happening with parents at that time. Some of my friends were getting kicked out of their houses. There was a lot of rescuing that we were all doing for each other. A lot of people didn't graduate just because school was so hard. I barely graduated myself just because we never wanted to be there. And even though that Havens was a teacher at my school, I still, I just never wanted to be at school. Like there was some of that support. It seems like, oh, there was all this support. It was so great. But there was a lot of other stuff going on too that we didn't want to get too deep into because we wanted to tell the celebratory story. But yeah, we were getting bullied. We were getting outed at school, yelled at in the hallways. Just a lot of those things were happening to us. And so and it was a little scary sometimes to be super visible, like to go and hang out with Miss Levitt for us, because people started to know what they were seeing by the time I came around. There was a little bit of fear around like being seen hanging out with like this teacher who everybody kind of knew was also gay, and we wanted to like hang out with her, I felt like it had to be the secret thing, like to kind of like maybe go to her room and say hi or whatever, because people started to know at that point. So yeah, it was great to be able to tell those stories, to show those stories and those interactions, show some photographs of everybody from that time, and hear more about the story of their relationship than I knew before.
Yeah, that was a really cool part of the film. You also do a really beautiful job capturing, in their religion. I'm a Catholic girl too, and coming out to a Catholic family, I'm sure, you know what that's like. You even touch on how therapy, counseling, and conversion therapy came up back then even.
Yeah. I think one of the really surprising things was to find out how many people had a very similar experience with therapy. And again, not wanting to give too much away, we do talk about how mothers were sending their daughters to therapy. I know, like my own mother, we never spoke of therapy in my family. I don't think that was a common thing. And I don't know if it was like a Latino family or, like, I don't know, but therapy never came up. And so when I came out, one thing, my mom got way more religious than I had ever seen her be. I mean, she was Catholic. She was devout. She went to church every Sunday, but I never heard her use like words like, well, that's evil, and then talk about Jesus so much. I was just like, whoa, what is happening here? So she got, very, like, she really wanted to change me. She wanted me to change. And I know she was scared for me. And I know she was scared for my soul and all that. And some surprising things happen around therapy for a lot of us, that we had shared this similar story. And that was one of the one most exciting parts of filming this, is just to hear like how many of us had these common stories that we weren't talking to each other necessarily about then. You know, I think there was all these things going on at home that we didn't always talk about with each other, except for maybe like one or two close friends would know what was going on. So we might have all been partying together and hanging out and dating and being teenagers together. But I think that's pretty common with teenagers too. I think, you know, you don't always know what's going on at home. You don't always know what's happening in people's, you know, like kind of underneath what they're bringing to school or to parties and to hangouts. So
and I think it's different with, and I think it's also different with LGBTQ teens, because then you have that added layer of, you know, if you come out to a family that's conservative, or you live in a town that's not a huge city like Albuquerque. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know people. Barbara, for you, coming out and growing up as a teenager who, when you realized lesbian, what was your experience like with family, and, you know, how were you able to navigate through that?
Well, so, you know, nobody's asked me this question either, so here we go. So, you know, I never came out to my parents. Never. My parents passed away and I never came out to them. But they knew. I don't know if that makes sense. I never came out and said, Mom, I'm gay, or Dad, I'm gay. My mom was very Catholic. She was very, you know, Latino, you know, Hispanic, very, very, just that, all those stereotypes. I was the youngest of 5. My mom was older when she had me. I was basically raised as an only child. My siblings are much older than I am. And so I think my mom always knew, because she always knew everything, but she just never said anything, and I never said anything. It was always unspoken. Nobody talked about it. And like I said, I didn't look like I was a lesbian. You know, I always had my friends over, or, you know, things like that. But it was just always unspoken. When I moved out of my house, and I literally moved next door to my parents, and me and my partner lived in the house next door to my parents for years.
Wow.
And nobody ever said anything. They just accepted her. You know, she was all part of the family, you know, for years. She participated in the family, you know, like the Christmas gift exchanges, and they always included her, but we never actually spoke the words, which, you know, it wasn't an issue for me, and it wasn't an issue for them. You know, I adopted 5 children. And
Wow.
my mom never asked me, you know, Mija, why aren't you having your own? Or, you know, nobody ever said anything. So my mom, you know, I feel very fortunate that my parents and even my extended family, my aunts, uncles, my sisters, my brother, you know, my nieces and nephews, nobody's ever like asked me. They just have accepted me and accepted whoever I was with and my lifestyle. So I didn't have to go through that. And I think that was a shock to me, to hear that, you know, kids my age at the time were going through that, because that stuff, you know, I didn't have to deal with. And I didn't, you know, that was the stuff I thought you only saw in movies. And to know that kids my age that I knew, that I grew up with, that I hung out with, that they were going through that, it really made me sad.
Yeah,
I didn't happen.
it does me too. I felt sad for some of the stories that I did hear in the film. And it's a good thing, because those stories do need to be told. Even though we're in 2020, we're still seeing it does still happen. We're still struggling for acceptance, especially in this political climate. In the film, you pose a great question. What would high school have been like if we were more accepted? Do you think kids going to high school in Albuquerque 2020, how do you think they are trying to navigate through coming out? I mean, yes, globally and in this country we're more accepted, but is it still a struggle on some level?
I think Barbara can answer that 'cause she actually
Yeah.
works in a high school.
Okay.
I'm a social worker in a high school, and I've been in the school setting for 12 years now. You know, it really surprises me how open kids are nowadays. I think, you know, back in 2010 when I first came to the schools, I remember there were two boys at the high school, and I saw them out on campus and they were holding hands and hugging. And I remember my first thought was, oh my God, you know, they shouldn't be doing that. They're going to, you know, something's going to happen. I was fearful for them. And I had just started at the school. And then a few weeks later, I find out that they're like the most popular couple in the school.
Wow. Wow.
And so, you know, it's very open in the schools that I've been. I mean, in Albuquerque, it's very open. However, there are some kids that they're still fearful for their home to come out at home. Not so much at school, but at home. You know, I know some students who are homeless, basically homeless, couch surfing, because their parents would not accept that. And for me, being a parent and being an adoptive parent, I could never. I still struggle with how parents can just, you know, turn their backs on their kids and not help them, or so it's still happening today. Not as much as it did back then. But it still is. And these kids nowadays, they're very strong in their beliefs and very strong in their identities. So they're willing to walk away from their families. They're willing to do it. They don't care. They want to be who they are, and they don't care who accepts them and who doesn't accept them.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting that the couple you said was really a popular couple, and that is good to hear. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the production side of it, StormMiguel. You had some really beautiful shots. I love the balloon fest. That was beautiful. Really great shots of the city. I even remember the rainbow shot of the rainbow in the distance. I loved how you were able to use graphics so creatively over some of these shots. Whose idea was it to use that? Who's the graphic designer in the group? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I knew I wanted Albuquerque to be kind of a character, like just a main, like the background, just a canvas for the whole story. So I being from Albuquerque, I haven't lived there. I haven't lived there since I moved out in '96, I believe, to San Francisco, and I go back as much as I can. It's still my home, but I wanted Albuquerque to be a part of it. So I knew the spots. I knew the Balloon Fiesta was important. I knew the San Diego Mountains were important. I knew that just like getting the mesas and like the drives and just the open land was really important, because these are all like, when people are from that place, it's like immediately recognizable. And so yeah, I had the idea for that, and my partner Annalise, who was a director of photography, we would go out and just film, you know, let's make sure we go get the mountains. I want to get the mountains from this part of the city, from that part of the city, and from that part of the city, and then I want to get a view from the mountains. The Sandias are just like, it's Albuquerque, you know. If you look at the Sandias, you know. The Balloon Fiesta is also just an iconic part of Albuquerque's culture. And so yeah, it just felt important to create that canvas and create some space, because we were telling these like really, like sometimes very heavy, sometimes very light, but just information, a lot of information in these stories. So it felt important to try to create moments of space to just bring us back to the land. And it was kind of a grounding us in a way of where we were and where this was happening.
Yeah, it made me want to go there for the Balloon Fiesta, because really beautifully shot. Oh, I've passed through Albuquerque, never spent a lot of time there, but I hear wonderful things about it. It looks like it's a beautiful, beautiful city.
It is beautiful.
What do you both hope is the main takeaway, say, for younger LGBTQ folks watching this? Barbara, I'll start with you. What would you like their biggest takeaway to be?
I would like them to know that, you know, that we paved the way, and that, you know, we stood strong, and they and we believed in what we were doing, and we wanted our identities as well. I think I would want them to know that, you know, there are lots of people out there like them, especially for kids who might see it, who are in smaller communities or smaller school settings. You know, a lot of our kids find their friends online. And sometimes that's not, I don't think, as healthy as finding friends in person. So I would hope that they could see that there's some positives to reaching out and putting yourself out there and finding people like you, and enjoying yourself. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who say they would never go back to high school. They would never go back to 15, 16 years old. I would, because we had fun. We had fun. And I met a lot of kids like me that weren't necessarily, you know, 5 minutes away from me. And we were able to do, I mean, we hung out so many different places. I mean, like Storm said, I met him through Tina, and we did some crazy things. And we didn't even grow up together. So I would like them to know that there's people out there, and not to be afraid.
Mhm. I like that. Storm, what would you say?
Well, everything that Barbara said, I absolutely agree. Like, I do feel like just to let folks know that, like, you're not alone, because there are some people still who probably feel alone, and don't have those kinds of connections. And also for me, I think it's really important for myself. Like, I like to know who came before me. I like to know about my culture as a queer person and as a trans person. I think that some of us maybe don't have ancestral ties in the way that others might. And I think that we can expand what that means outside of bloodline, right? That we have like this rich culture that has come before us. Like, for me, it was such a gift to get to know who came before me and who brought that. And it's also been such a gift to know who came before in trans communities. You know, when I think about my trans elders and the people that paved the way, for me, that gets to expand my lineage and my ancestry. And so I'm hoping this film does that for youth and for people who come later, that they can look back and say, oh, especially in Albuquerque, this is who paved the way here. This is who our queer ancestors are in this place. And that's happening a little bit. Like, there was a queer ancestors project that happened here in San Francisco, where young people did artwork that was about a piece of queer history and queer ancestry. And someone did a piece on the whistle. It was an etching that was their own interpretation of the whistle. And they contacted me first and asked me about it, and I sent them a copy of the movie to watch. And, you know, so just that people are already starting to see that, like, this is a part of, whether they were from Albuquerque or not, this is a part of their queer ancestry, feels really, really good, because that's one of the things I really hope people get out of it, because I think that enriches our lives to know those things.
You know, I'd like to add that, I'm sorry, I'd like to add that I think the other thing that I hope that young kids see when they see this movie is that the continuity of relationships. Because we, you know, once we connected, it was like we had been friends over the past 20 years. I see too many kids now, the relationship building skills aren't there. They don't have friends from even 3 years ago. And I think it's important for us to maintain those relationships and show them that it's possible to maintain relationships near or far. You know, as long as you find the common ground and you share experiences, because our kids now, they don't have those.
Mm-hmm. I think this film, and I hope this film will resonate with a lot of LGBTQ youth, no matter where they are, whether it's Albuquerque or across the country, because you're right, it's about relationships and experiences. So I hope it does. I hope a lot of people get to see this. It was really a sweet movie. I loved it. Like I said, I laughed, and then I was moved emotionally to the other side with some of those stories. They were just really touching. The film is called The Whistle. StormMiguel Florez, producer, director, and Barbara Priscilla. Thank you so much both for your time. This has been a pleasure. And I hope that whoever watches this, whether they've been wrecked or haven't been wrecked yet, they'll get a lot out of this movie.
Thank you, Belinda.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for having
Pleasure
us.
to you both. Take care.
Thank you.
You too.
All right.
Have a great festival, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.